Sunset Boulevard is perhaps the most famous film about film. It's a funny yet disturbing movie from 1950 directed by Billy Wilder, and it follows a washed-up screenwriter, Joe Gillis, as he's pulled into the insane world of an even more washed-up former silent film star, Norma Desmond. The film provides a critical commentary on the film industry, but Wilder's film also aims to blur the lines between illusion and reality, explore the impacts of fame and vanity, and question our understanding of dreams and ambition, particularly in the context of Hollywood. Crucially, these themes are explored through the film's construction and through the cinematic techniques that Wilder uses in every scene. Today, we're going to analyze some of the key cinematic techniques that Wilder uses in his film to convey his critique of the film industry. We're going to look at a few key shots from the film and then break them down together. Remember, VCE examiners are looking for students who will closely analyze their set text. And particularly if you're analyzing a film like Sunset, it's really important that you go that extra step and analyze not just what happens in the film, but how the director has used the visual language of film to communicate their message. Let me give you a quick example for how this can elevate your essay. Compare the difference between an essay that says, "Through the final shot of the film, Wilder shows Norma completely succumbing to her fantasy," to one that argues, "Through his utilization of an increasingly glossy and distorted filter in the ominous final shot, Wilder depicts Norma being completely overtaken by her romanticized view of old Hollywood." It's quite a bit better, right? Let's get stuck into our analysis of Sunset Boulevard, breaking down some of the key pieces of evidence that you can use in your essays. By the way, if you are struggling with any of the terms that we're using in this video and you want a more comprehensive breakdown of the kinds of meta-language you should be using in your essays when you're analyzing a film, we've got an excellent blog post on film meta-language that I will link below. Firstly, camera techniques. Camera techniques and framing are arguably some of the primary ways that a filmmaker will intentionally direct the eye of the audience, framing how we view each scene. There are a few different framing methods that a director will consider. So firstly, there is the distance between the camera and the subject, or shot type. That could be long shot, mid shot, close up, etc. There's also the angle of the camera. So there could be a high angle shot, a low angle, eye level, bird's eye view. They also might consider camera movement, so things like tracking, panning, zooming, so on and so forth. Let's look at some shots from Sunset Boulevard. The opening shot of a film is always incredibly important to unpack. Sunset Boulevard's seemingly straightforward opening shot includes the title of the film by showing us the real-life Hollywood street. But you might notice that rather than picturing a street sign, for example, which might be the more obvious choice, we're looking at a dirty and stained curbside. Wilder also shoots this curbside from a high angle, so from the opening of the film, we are looking down on Hollywood in the gutter, represented by this sort of dirty and unflattering symbol of the film industry. This sets us up immediately to understand that this film is a critical commentary and a satire about the film industry. Our first look at Norma Desmond is within this wide shot, just as Joe Gillis has entered her disheveled mansion for the first time. Now, just as the opening shot of a film is worth analysing, the introductory shot of a character is also really worth closely analysing, as the director will typically try to establish their characteristics or their place within the film's wider world. This long shot of Norma, obscured by a screen, establishes her distance, both physical and mental, from the world around her. Removing herself from an industry that has long since moved on from her, Norma is severely out of touch with the reality of the world outside her home. Also, as this shot is from Joe's perspective, Wilder foreshadows the distance that will emerge between himself and Norma, as he is always disingenuously humouring her poor quality scripts or romantic advances, always keeping her at a distance. Another shot that conveys crucial information about character relationships is this shot, where Joe officially loses Betty towards the end of the film, refusing to give up his long-term contract with Norma. Here, Wilder frames Betty using a medium shot, and through this, combined with her refusal to make eye contact with Joe and her literal statement that she can't look at him, we again see how the framing of the scene conveys the emotional distance between the two characters. Wilder's careful use of camera angles is also shown at the end of the film, after Betty abandons Joe at the gates of Norma's mansion. Crucially, this all happened because of Norma, as she called Betty to reveal the details of her relationship with Joe. And so Wilder shoots Norma at a low angle with Joe looking up at her. Now, the level of power that Norma's exerted over Joe in this moment might seem minimal. In the context of what happens next, this scene becomes a lot more important. On the brink of taking Joe's life, Wilder uses this shot to establish that Joe should be looking up at her in fear, and it's his dismissive opinion of her that will soon lead to his death. Mise-en-scène is perhaps the most deceptively simple cinematic technique. It involves analysing everything that appears within a frame and how it's been arranged by the director to convey meaning. This includes elements like costumes, props, the design of a set, even the actors' performances. Usually, mise-en-scène is used to reinforce something that we're already being told about a character through the film's dialogue. We can see a couple of examples of characterization through mise-en-scène early in the film, as the audience's introduction to Joe Gillis visually communicates his unconcerned and detached attitude. He's dressed in a bathrobe while the sun is blazing outside, and his debt collectors are clearly up and doing their job, which speaks to his slovenliness or lazy approach to life. The set design in this scene further characterizes Joe, with the script directly describing the reproductions of characterless paintings that cover his walls. Here, the props used in this set arguably serve as a metaphor for the profit-driven, bases-loaded script he's working on in that very moment. Equally, our introduction to the home of Norma Desmond establishes key elements of her character. The house is, as Joe describes, crowded with Norma Desmonds in the form of countless framed photographs from her silent film era. These self-portraits constantly looking out onto Norma symbolize the deluded fantasy world that she's placed herself in. They show how this world is based around her still being a youthful and famous actress, and how this delusion is maintained through her only communicating inwardly, refusing to face the reality of the outside world. Symbols. As symbolizes is a verb that's very commonly misused, it's important here to provide you with a very clear, simple definition. A symbol is something that contains levels of meaning not present at first glance or literal translation. In film, the most common symbols are objects that reappear throughout the film, working to symbolize concepts that develop the text's key themes. One of the most seemingly inexplicable parts of the film actually contains one of its most important symbols, with Norma's pet chimp playing an important foreshadowing role. The chimp, a pet that Norma owned and trained to amuse her, leaves open a vacant role that Joe will gradually fill after having unknowingly interrupted its funeral. From this point on in the film, Joe is manipulated or trained by Norma to provide entertainment or companionship to her. Naturally, Joe also ends up dead within the bounds of Norma's estate, so this symbol foreshadows the trajectory of his character. All of this is directly alluded to through the mixed-up dream that Joe has the night of the funeral, imagining an organ player and the chimp dancing for pennies that he will soon become. This naturally brings us to the organ itself, which serves as a physical reminder of the unflattering parts of Joe's new role. This shot is included after Joe wakes up from his mixed-up dream, and it frames Max's organ-playing hands as large and overpowering, while a much smaller Joe storms in and demands to know why his clothes and things have been moved into Norma's house without his say-so. Norma then reveals that she ordered this action and that Joe's apartment debts are all taken care of, waving away his attempt at grasping back any control by asking that it be deducted from his salary. This scene reveals the symbolic role that the organ plays in Sunset, reminding Joe of the shameful and powerless role of the pet chimp that he'll now be playing, as well as what he will be dancing for. Finally, we come to illusions, one of the techniques that Sunset Boulevard is most famous for. An illusion is when an author or director refers to something outside the world of the text, like other texts or real-world people, places, events, etc. Biblical or mythological allusions are common in fiction, but sometimes referring to something closer to our world can bring a degree of realism to certain texts, strengthening their social commentary. As for cinematic allusions, being a film about films, Sunset naturally contains references to other films. In particular, Wilder doesn't shy away from adding an extra degree of realism to his references to the film industry. Central to this would be his use of shots from the real and still operational Paramount Pictures studio as Joe tries to sell his cliche baseball novel. Paramount Pictures is actually the studio that released Sunset Boulevard, which adds a sort of self-deprecating edge to Wilder's satire about the film industry. The scene with that cigar-chomping Paramount executive as he cynically suggests changing Joe's concept to one about a girls' baseball team because it might put in more numbers, packs extra punch because of these references to the real Paramount Pictures studio, which shows the effect of using this allusion to strengthen the social commentary of the film. Allusions to specific films are also used for humorous purposes or for character development. So if you take Joe's observation that the extravagance of the funeral for Norma's pet chimp means that he must have been a very important chimp, maybe the grandson of King Kong. Here we see that Joe's sarcastic and witty character is shown to the audience. And these references also place the film firmly in the world of real Hollywood, again working to strengthen the satire that it offers about the film industry. Similarly, allusions to the world of literature help flesh out both the characters and the world of Sunset Boulevard. The most standout example of this would be the references to Charles Dickens' novel, Great Expectations. Joe comments that the unhappy look of Norma's house reminds him of Miss Havisham from Great Expectations. Miss Havisham is a character who, after being abandoned by her fiancé, refuses to change her clothes and lives in seclusion in a rotting wedding dress. Norma directly parallels Miss Havisham as characters both stuck in the past, with Norma's placement of all of these self-portraits from her younger days being reminiscent of Miss Havisham's insistence on keeping all of the clocks in her house set to the exact time that she received the letter of rejection from her fiancé. So this comparison to the Dickens character highlights how detached Norma is from reality as she attempts to live in the past, suggesting that her behaviour is just as delusional as refusing to remove a rotting wedding dress. Also, the fate of Miss Havisham's character is that her wedding dress catches fire and leaves her as an invalid, which foreshadows Norma's descent into madness. And there you have it. That is our breakdown of some of the key cinematic techniques used in Sunset Boulevard. If you have any other particular questions about this text, feel free to drop them in the comments or have a look at our free blog post library for some other texts on this film.